So, ladies and gents, welcome to the second ever podcast for the First Customer Club. We're a new brand that's dedicated to answering one specific business challenge, which is how to find your first customers and your first users. Find, keep, and grow them. We're going to bring on entrepreneurs to talk about this specific topic, to shed some light, to shed some education, to inspire us to go out there and do the same thing. And I'm excited to be joined today by my good friend and colleague, Carson Milberg. Carson, give everybody a wave.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Awesome stuff. Carson, you're the co-founder of PostEd. You're an ed tech startup selling software to universities that's really taking the student experience beyond education. You guys got your first customer, which we'll talk about. You're a revenue positive startup. And your team of entrepreneurs here has done a few things I want to talk about today that are really cool. So first of all, you figured out how to leverage an unfair advantage. And maybe we can talk about how other entrepreneurs can find theirs. We're going to talk about the link between product development and business development, because you guys have constantly been evolving your pitch, your product, the whole shebang. And we're also going to talk about it from the perspective of how you guys sold software to a 30,000 student university institution and the journey it took you guys to get there. So I'm excited to jump into those topics. We're going to have a good time. We got a new unique beverage we're going to crack open in just a second. But Carson, wanted to ask you to share your background and kind of what got you down the path of entrepreneurship, kind of pre-ramp up weekend, which we'll get into next.
Sure. Well, I've always joked about how entrepreneurship was in my blood. Both my parents are entrepreneurs in their own right. They own their own companies. My mother's a specialty foods broker. And my father worked in the medical diagnostics industry for decades, and he's in recruiting now, and they're both very business minded. And so I've had a lot of those influences around me always growing up, and I always thought to think entrepreneurially and try to grow that way. So business was always something that interested me a lot. I went to the University of Victoria as a business student, and what was interestingly enough, I PostEd is the first business venture I've been a part of. And it really sprung up organically. And as we started to get involved more and more, I discovered that entrepreneurship was more of a calling career-wise than just a passion. So it was an interesting experience that way, where it kind of snuck up on me.
Yeah, I don't think it was ever, something that you went around perhaps in elementary school or high school saying, I'm going to be this, hey? It was something that happened. Kind of walk me through the first steps of how you guys figured out what you were going to do, who you were going to provide it for. I understand that you took part of something called a startup weekend, and let's broaden this beyond the confines of Manitoba, Canada. You took part of a 54-hour event where you went from concept to business pitch. Tell me, what was that experience like to you? Do you recommend others do it? Was this a fundamental piece?
Absolutely. We got brought in. I'll first how I got involved in the company to begin with. It started with my co-founder, Brett Swope, reaching out to a few friends of ours, and talking about how he knew there were resources available at the university he attended, but took like 6 hours, like some night, trying to find out how he could get a variety of different services, and how everything felt so disjointed. We knew stuff was available, but it was so hard to find the things he cared about. And as he described his experience while we were playing some video games over Discord, realized that everyone he was talking to in that friend group went to a different university, but felt the same thing at their school, where we knew there were great resources and opportunities and stuff for us to get engaged with. But we didn't know exactly how to find it and weren't directly involved with it at the time. And it seemed like there was a big hole there where it couldn't be that hard for schools to find a way to really connect students to all these opportunities that they put so much money and funding into. you kind of hear about in the ether, but don't tangibly know how to get connected with. So that was the first kind of string that brought us in. We thought, well, what if we try to figure out a solution? And I don't know who it was. I think Brett was initially connected with North Forge, who told them about the ramp up weekend. And it was this very surreal experience of a weekend intensive where everyone comes in and pitches 5 million ideas on the first evening, on the Friday night. And about 99% of them are just terrible, but it's all good for the spirit of the weekend.
Right.
And the idea from there is everyone kind of gets together either with groups they've come with or with other people at the event, and to put together, I guess, little mini companies for the weekend to see how far they can take this idea. And over that weekend, the incubator will provide a variety of different mentors with great amounts of experience to kind of help shape the company. You put as much work as you can in over 2 days. And then there's a large gala Sunday night in front of something like 400 business people. I think the mayor showed up, and a variety of other nerve-wracking figures. And you pitch what you've been able to build over the weekend, and in a kind of competition format. So,
And that was really where the idea got some traction. Hey, that was where you guys, for your first kind of plan on paper, came together that weekend. Is this something that you'd recommend others do? Like, is
absolutely. It's a tremendous. First of all, they're a ton of fun. It's a ton of work, but it's really, really exciting, and there's a lot of skill development because everyone's kind of put in positions where they might not be totally familiar, but it needs to get done over the next 2 hours for the whole team to move on to the next thing. So you better learn it quick. And so it's kind of a very fun, like out of the frying pan into the fire kind of experience. And there are so many really smart people at your disposal and resources that you wouldn't have otherwise. So it's a really, really great way to get traction where, hey, we have some idea about this type of value proposition, but we don't really know how to test that. Whereas at a ramp up weekend, we have this idea, a mentor says, oh, I know someone who's directly involved in it. Let's go call him and see if he'd buy it. And all of a sudden you're able to utilize a network you wouldn't have yourself and really learn a ton about the company you're building much faster than you would in any other context.
Right.
So 100% I would recommend doing it.
Yeah, you mentioned the word speed, or you talked about being able to do it faster. And I think that's it. It's the ability to go from, to take any particular idea or concept or early stage business and kind of put it through the ringer at a speed that you otherwise couldn't, right?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think so many people go, and there's these roadblocks where you have the idea and it percolates for kind of a long time, but you don't really know how, like, even if you do kind of know what the first step is, you don't know how to get started on it. And there's so many like things in your head that kind of stop you and kind of get in your own way. The cool thing about Ramp Up Weekend is there's like very tight timelines about, because you're going to be on stage, whether you like it or not, in front of people watching you pitch your idea. And so the more you can get done right now, the better that pitch is going to be. So it gets all those mental roadblocks in your head are all, tossed aside so that you can get right to work.
So it's going to kill analysis paralysis.
Oh, absolutely.
Part of a ramp up weekend or a startup weekend, as they're, commonly known outside of our area. Startup weekends are great. Even if you don't have an idea, you just show up to a startup weekend. Someone else has an idea. You meet people, you join teams, you find people with different skill sets. In my experience, I was part of a team. We ended up winning or getting second place. The idea went nowhere, but I actually found my co-founder from the event.
There you go.
So it turned into like a working job interview, just having 54 hours to kind of put your best ideas, thoughts, working practices forward. Like you mentioned, it's a lot of fun. It's a whirlwind. It's maybe a little bit skewed to extroverts, but if I wasn't, I actually consider myself an introvert, and I do consider other introverts. Kick yourself in the butt, get out there. You might be nervous your first couple minutes, but there's icebreaker activities. You'll have your sandwiches, your coffees, and you'll fit right in.
I think I might counter that. I think the cool part about that scenario is that people who have a lot of difficulty networking in the first place, if you go there and all you say is, hey, I know how to do this one thing, team is going to want you and bring
Yeah.
you into that. And it's a really good way to start growing that network without having to go to like cocktail parties or like mixers or do other things where they're like people are, watching speakers or what else.
Yeah.
Um,
Because you're actually building something,
yeah,
right?
if you're interested in just working, I think it's actually a pretty good environment.
I would completely concur. So yeah, that's where that came from.
Mhm.
Carson, we're gonna jump into a bunch of
Sure.
topics, but I'm parched. So
Yes.
as on the theme of this show, when I have anybody on, we drink some random beverage that we've never heard of in our lives, just to kind of humanize it. So right now we have a particular beverage which you've approved, which is called Jasmine Grapefruit Drink. I
Hmm.
had my Chinese speaking friend actually go and vet the lingo on here because I don't understand what this means. I picked it up in
Oh,
Chinatown. It's
did you?
specifically from the Chinese province Jiangxi.
Okay.
So I can't point to that on a map. I had to go to Google Translate to understand how to pronounce it. But hey, it seems like something that is very flavorful. It doesn't say specifically it has sugar on it, but I understand that it must. And
It has to.
I'd like to crack it open with you and
Well,
say cheers.
cheers. New experiences.
And hopefully it's enjoyable.
Cheers. I actually quite like that.
It tastes a little bit like
Mm.
tea. It's like the mix of tea and a pop drink, if I was to say.
Yeah, it's like green tea and a little sugary syrup. It's pretty sweet.
I like that. Okay, good. Well, we're gonna enjoy that
Okay.
for the
Okay. A little
foreseeable
tart
future.
too. Huh. Different.
Exactly.
Mm.
So you got started at the startup weekend event. You guys figured out what you were going to put forward. Um, the idea changed a whole bunch along the
Absolutely.
way. I just want to hear like how did it change and who was it and what did they say that kind of took you from what you thought you were going to do and build to what you
Mm.
actually did?
Well, it's really interesting. The whole value proposition of the company. It's almost as if you're throwing darts at a dartboard and you don't quite hit the bullseye right on your first thought or go of it. But if you can get close enough, it helps you circle in to get closer each iteration. So the one thing that we've always thought was true, and I think this line came up during ramp up weekend, is that students are buried under an avalanche of irrelevant information, and it stops them from finding the things they actually care about. So I think that was the one thing we got right at the start, which allowed us to go on this journey. But after that moment, I mean, the types of information that we thought was important wasn't necessarily important to students. The types of things that were, everything outside of that statement kind of grew and changed as this went on. At Ramp Up Weekend, we essentially pitched a scholarship aggregator because we thought that was one of the biggest issues for students was financial pressure, and that if we can alleviate this, we can help retention rates. And then, so we were fundamentally on scholarships. And then we had a talk. I think it was the head of North Forge at the time. I might be wrong about this, but Jeff Risner, he was just a brilliant guy and a mentor we had access to talk to by going through this program. And we spoke to him, and over the course of an hour, he outlined how, well, if we're going to be using a mobile app to connect students, which we had planned on, he outlined this whole idea of oxygen. So the idea is, what part of your app makes it so that users need it to breathe? And the scholarships are great, but they'll download it and look at it once that way, and you won't get the kind of engagement you need or create the type of value kind of long lasting for any of your users. So what can you do to build oxygen? And that got us thinking a tremendous amount, where we thought, well, really what's important in that case is events and interacting on campus itself. This brought us down an entire rabbit hole. We had no idea what we had just found. It turns out student engagement is one of the most important factors for universities. We didn't even know this next fact until a year later. But if you take like a highly engaged student socially, no matter what their socioeconomic factors are, or no matter what their academic grades are, if they're highly engaged, they only have a 4% chance of dropping out. But if that student has low social engagement, no matter what their other characteristics are, they have a 28.8% chance of attrition. And this is a really big deal for universities because there's a lot of money spent on recruiting students and then a lot of money spent on educating them, and that isn't really recouped until they complete their degree. And the majority of students are going to drop out after their first or second year, if they drop out at all. So making sure to retain students in that group at that time is so incredibly important. Sorry about that. I gesticulating a little wildly.
No
So
worries. Yeah,
so
that
we found out from there that we need to focus more and more on the event side. And the more we did that, the more the importance of that transition grew. So up until our launch, and when we found that usership, I mean, no one cared about scholarships and the beautiful scholarship portal we made. It was all about the events and connections and clubs. So
yeah, you guys. So you figured out the thing that you thought made you special, right? You
sure.
realized how important engagement was. You realized how student retention rates were brutal. You figured out that there was sort of a gap, a sore spot when it came to events and awareness, and how everyone is putting. I think everyone was still promoting events using paper up on bulletin boards
Yeah,
at the time,
exactly.
right? You
Yeah.
guys figured out where you thought you were most valuable. When did you figure out who you were most valuable to? Like, university is a huge place, and when you realize, okay, you have something that can help the university as the customer, and then you thought they should pay you money because of this value you provide. How did you navigate thinking about like who you should talk to at the university?
Well, that was a huge challenge. And frankly, we didn't know until we approached everybody. That was, it was really a thing. We know someone, this is important to somebody here at the university. We had no idea who, and we had no idea how complex the landscapes of university bureaucracy are. It's kind of best described as feudal kingdoms where everyone's working together, but also not really. And there's just a lot going on, and it's
Right.
difficult to navigate. But we reached out to everybody at the same time over the summer. The team at the time, just to add a little more context, we were under a tremendous amount of pressure. We had funding that had fallen through. We knew we needed to build revenue in order to bring in the funding we needed to keep the company running. And so it became a very large time crunch. And we also know that for any new activity or program to work at a university, it has to be used in the first 6 weeks after September 1st for new students to use it. So there was a huge time crunch over the summer of we need to have our first deal locked in and good to go before September. So that type of pressure allowed us to really pursue any avenue. So what ended up happening is we reached out to as high up the chain as we could go to get time from anybody who would talk to us. And from there, you kind of get navigated into the right channels, starting to slowly streamline that process.
Right. So you guys reached out. Did the first people you reached out to at the University of Manitoba, and we'll get to the unfair advantage.
Sure.
And it's largely because you guys were students,
Yeah,
and
that helps.
most of you were students at the U of M, sort of, involved in student groups and all that stuff. So how did you first start navigating? Were you sending cold emails to people that you thought might care, or was it like you had a family friend and you took that avenue?
No, we opened with cold emails, I think. We
Okay.
absolutely did. And it was interesting. I think the first meeting occurred while I was still in Victoria. So I actually wasn't there. I run almost all of our business development now. And for our first pitch meeting, I wasn't even in the room. And the rest of the team met with, I believe, the a student affairs provost at the time, or vice provost. And she told them, or what the message got back to us is that they liked the idea, but with everything that was going on at the school and the time frame, they couldn't help us at this time. But hey, best of luck. We hope somebody can help you get this running. Now, in retrospect, that's clearly just a polite pass. But we took that as, oh, great. So we should contact all of your faculties because maybe they can help us. And, we have your blessing now, and we'll go and reach out. And so we did. And there was some interesting, it started a lot of different processes because each faculty kind of moves on their own speed. There was initial interest from, I think, a couple of different colleges, some of the big faculties. But I think by casting a wide net and being able to articulate what we were doing was pretty unique, and how important it was to reach students. We were able to get a meeting with the spoiler, our first customer, the Faculty of Music. And this is where it's even more interesting because all the value that we thought we brought to the Faculty of Music wasn't really what they were interested in at all. And they had their own ideas of the value they'd be getting out of us. But I don't want to jump too far ahead if we want to cover some other things before we get in there.
Yeah, let's definitely go down that path. Yeah, I want to make sure. I think it's very important to understand the details because,
Sure.
Number one, they're never perfect. It's not like, and that could be another question is, what would you guys do if you could do it all again? But you guys just ignorantly went for it to some extent, right? You guys didn't know. You started talking to people who kind of pointed you in the right direction. And you went from some cold emails to some face-to-face conversations.
That's true.
Right? And do you remember, so when you finally got in front of the Faculty of Music, do you remember who connected you to them? And do you remember what their reaction was when they first understood the value proposition you suggested?
Absolutely. Well, it was very interesting because we reached out via email and got connected. I think there might have been another connection somewhere in the school. I can't remember who set up that first meeting. I do know we were trying all channels. And frankly, I think something that helped with that was because we're all students, there was a little less nerves about reaching out to university administrators because when you're a student, there's a bit of an entitlement to that connection where you don't really feel like you're putting them out by wanting to get a little of their time and talking to them. And it definitely helps to put that, hey, this is a student initiative at the start of what you're talking about, because that's what it was. And it gives a little more credence to what we were doing. And I think that helped us get some time of day. But we got the first meeting with the Faculty of Music, and the dean at the time was, I think normally she's just a professor, but she was the interim dean named, I don't know if I won't call her out right now, but it was so funny because walking right into that meeting, it turns out we had a past connection way back. Believe it or not, when I was in grade 9, I used to sing opera for the Manitoba Opera Company, and we were doing the Magic Flute in German, and I do not speak German, and didn't know how to sing German at the time. And so they brought in some extra help from the Faculty of Music at the University of Manitoba to help train me. And wouldn't you know, the dean I'm about to pitch to now was the same woman who taught me German in grade 9. And so there was some very interesting reminiscing there. And it was one of those kind of small Winnipeg moments where everybody knows each other. And we mutually knew a ton of people in the whole music world. So it was a really great way to break the ice before we started getting down to business.
Yeah, so you had a connection one way or another. You didn't know that you did, but
not a clue.
You reached out to enough people and you found something strongly in common with somebody that gave you a bit of an edge. And then you went through that process. You said that what they thought was the benefit of your product was much different than what you said the benefit. From a high level, do you want to share
Absolutely. Well, we thought
how that was?
we thought the main benefit to each of the faculties was you have all these events and programming you put out to engage your students will help make sure all your students come to those events. Now, the faculty of music, they've got 300 or so students. They're not really concerned about faculty of music's coming to concerts. They have to, they're going to. But what they would love is to have students who aren't in the faculty of music come to their concerts. They put on well over 70 concerts a year, and they know there's students in the faculty of science. They know there's students in the faculty of arts who love music, who either are musicians themselves or just want to go to a concert and have no idea what the faculty of music's doing. And we provided, in their eyes, a very unique conduit to share with those students and get them to faculty of music events. And that was a huge game changer, and really all they were interested in at the time. Now, something we didn't know what was going on, and this is, I don't know how true this is. It's something we heard kind of through a rumor mill, but 2 weeks before we approached the faculty of music, they had reached out to the marketing communications office and asked, like, would it be possible if there was a tool where we could find a way to reach other students who are interested in music around the school about their events? And they told them, hey, not only does that not exist, but it's impossible and it's not going to happen, whatever else. And then we kind of appeared out of the blue with just the thing they were asking for without knowing. And so I think that sped up the process significantly because they were already on the lookout for something like us.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because if you would have approached your first customer having not built anything, having not prepared anything, you might have not gotten a meeting, right? Like there's a certain amount of, you need to do something in order
Sure.
to get attention, but you need to do it and still be willing to flex. So
Absolutely.
you need to be willing to adjust your product, adjust your messaging. But a lot of entrepreneurs come with ideas and they expect that
Hmm.
thing on the napkin is going to get them in the door, that's going to get them their paid customers.
Hmm.
It's a beautiful idea, but I suppose actually having something started, you guys were in the process of
We
developing
were,
your product
yeah,
at that time, right?
we were
You
in development, but it was definitely, like, we definitely didn't have anything we could show them comfortably. We had
okay?
like screenshots, some mock-ups, right? Hey, the app will be like this, and when you hit this button, this will happen. But we couldn't really show them that. I think we had, well, it was very interesting. Our first demo was made by, at Ramp Up Weekend, a video game designer who built it in Unity, and we kind of like faked an app where it was like a screen recorder of him playing essentially like a menu he'd built in a game engine, because that's what he knew how to build. And the app didn't end up looking anything like that, but it was enough to kind of get the message across of what we were trying to build. And
Yeah.
it looked and seemed like an app, and we knew we were going to be able to build something like it, but we didn't have it yet. We were very clear that we didn't have it yet, but we had to show off kind of what we were getting to. So we were kind of halfway to an app when we were making this pitch. But the deal was closed before the app was ready somehow. In retrospect, it would have been made a lot more sense to try to get some deals before putting all of the money into development and fully committing whether or not we had customers. It was probably a misstep on our part.
So if you could do it again, you would have delayed some of the product development until you actually landed that first customer.
I think I would have done a lot more market research first. I don't know if I'd have to sign the first customer before I did any development whatsoever. I think that's a little too cautious, but I do think it really doesn't hurt to have some conversations before you build anything, to go reach out, to find out what your customers really feel like, and not just like, hey, is this something you'd buy, but like getting a better understanding of them through discovery questions so that you can know really what keeps them up at night, where their main pain points are, because that will save you a tremendous amount of money in development, because you won't be making things that they don't care about.
Right.
And you can highlight and focus on the stuff that really matters to them that you kind of had an eye on in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just feel if you guys wouldn't have had those screenshots, if you
Oh
wouldn't have
no,
been
no.
able to say, this is coming. We're doing
Mm-hmm.
this. It's coming. We started building it. It's going to be available soon. Here's what we think is the big thing we're solving. I think if you couldn't put, your best foot
Of course.
forward like that, I don't think you would have gotten the deal, even
Mm-hmm.
though what you thought they needed and what they really saw out of your solution were kind of different things. It's kind of
Oh, absolutely.
interesting how, you still need to put up something because these people,
Mm-hmm.
you want them to take you seriously. You want them to consider you a real business. We're talking real dollars here. This isn't
Mm-hmm.
$9.99 a month. So you guys needed to show value, and
Sure.
and you found your first customer one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
So that unfair advantage, you know, the when I was working with you guys, and for the record, we worked together to actually build the product.
That's true.
So I helped in as an advisor, as a consultant through my business, through my connections. We actually built this product through
Mm-hmm.
Tardigrade Labs, and and I helped you guys go from here's what our idea is, here's what our mock-ups are, here's what we think our customers want. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the background how
Absolutely.
story here. You guys, what always excited me was how you had an unfair advantage. And I thought one of those advantages was the fact that you guys were students. The
Mm-hmm.
fact that a few members of the team, what, two or three of you guys were from U of M?
Two attended the U of M,
Two.
and then one of us went to the University of Winnipeg, and I, of course, went to UVic.
UVic. Yeah, exactly. So you guys knew the student groups, you guys knew the faculties, you guys knew sort of the flavor of that
Mm-hmm.
particular university, not just all universities, but the specifics of that universities. You might have even known, who led certain departments, had
Sure.
access to email addresses that other people might not, whatever. But like, what do you think was the real thing that gave you an unfair advantage? Because to me, as an outsider, it seemed like it was your connections to the student body.
Mm.
Would you agree? Would you disagree?
Well, I think so much has to do with credibility, right? If you're going to talk about a student product, it helps if you're a student, right? If we're talking to administrators, like this is how you're going to be able to help and engage students. And we know this because these are pain points we've been through, is going to lend a lot more credibility if you don't have that experience. And then it also helps us when designing the app is we know what we'll interact with and what we won't interact with. The biggest problem we found, well, I guess the unfair advantage is the industry of ed tech is very different than a lot of other industries, because a lot of the programs and software that university students have to use on a daily basis isn't made with like a kind of a regular free market style of like building products. They're built through a request for proposals where they're essentially cobbled together via committee, and you end up with a lot of really strange outcomes that way that are difficult to use in many instances. And now some universities have phenomenal websites, but I think a lot of students will agree with me that their majority of university websites are exceptionally difficult to navigate and not really user-friendly. And we had this idea, this focus from the get-go that everything needs to be user experience orientated for students, because if you can capture their attention and their engagement and get them to interact well on the platform, all the other benefits and information and things that the university wants will come from that. But if you can't get them to use the app and enjoy using the app, then you can't build anything else on top of it.
Yeah.
So
So
it was about
basically,
building that foundation.
in order to have a happy, so you got the first customer, but in order to ultimately make them happy and to do
Mm-hmm.
a study to get customer number two, whether it was another faculty at the University of Manitoba or another school, you needed users, right?
Absolutely.
So do you guys remember what were the first few things you did to get users? I remember you guys did some crazy stuff with stickers. Do you remember
Oh,
some
we did a lot of stunts. So we
stuff?
knew there's things that work with students and there's things that really don't work with students. Now, everybody and their mother puts up posters. And we were very anti-poster because we thought like the whole point of this is that posters don't get the message across anyway, right?
Right.
Like I see your poster for like the Youth Christian Horseback Riders Club. I'm like, that's great for 4 students, right? But for the rest of us, it's just another thing in the way stopping me from seeing what I actually want to see.
Right.
So it's, we wanted to find ways to kind of cut through a lot of that noise and get everybody involved. Now, anybody will tell you the best way to do this is going to be word of mouth is the best way. And the majority of our usership grew organically. But before you're able to kind of get that rolling, you got to build up a bit of a user base. So all of our ideas were how to kickstart different things like this. And the first thing we did is we just set up booths in hallways and campuses where the team would go down. We had little post-ed baseball caps made. We printed a ton of stickers. And we actually made business cards that just described post-ed and what the app was, how you use it, where to get it. This is what it's called. Download it here. It does this thing for you. And we would go on campus and talk to just as many students as possible and handed out these cards, which I don't think the custodial staff liked because a lot of people didn't put them away properly at first. And then we upped the ante with that, where we opened an Instagram account and started doing some of that marketing. But to get it a little more engaging was we had a sticker contest. And the idea was if you put a post-ed sticker, the best picture of a post-ed sticker up somewhere on campus gets like $500 or whatever it was. And we gave people a month and as many stickers as possible to go and get the best sticker shot. And people went a little nuts for a while. The picture submissions were cool at first, and then people started doing a lot of videos, and those got a little crazy. Where you had people climbing up like the sides of parkades to stick like stickers in places that really shouldn't be reachable, which we were blown away by. But the guy who ended up winning created an entirely new Instagram account called Posted Pick Me, where it was like 30 or so like pictures and videos of him going up and like spraying. My favorite was there was a video of him going up to regular students and using our pitch to get them to download the app, just like fully doing the whole thing like we were at the booth. Wow. And no, it was a really cool way to build engagement and excitement about that, and people got into it, and it was a really great way to build our initial base of users. What else did we do? I know we did booths, stickers. We sponsored a few socials where either you'd have to buy regular tickets or you could download post-ed, and because we were able to do ticket distribution through the app, your ticket was free with your download. So that was a great way to bolster some levels. And we just experimented a lot with ways to create and grow users. We tried to do anything that was a little outside the box.
Yeah, and the fact that you guys were users, I think was just such an advantage, such a hack, such a benefit, because you guys were part of that ecosystem. Like very rarely are you selling something and you actually are the user. In many situations, you're familiar with the user. In many situations, you're familiar with the customer. But in very few situations, you are the user. And you guys were active users too. That's where I think a lot of the unfair advantage comes from. You guys were involved in student groups. You guys were presidents of this, presidents of that. Sure. You guys were involved in creating this student experience before the app was there to support it. So I think that you guys benefited just from having this extra knowledge that not any other student would have been able to do. You guys were like the cream of the crop in terms of your understanding of what makes the university tick for the student body.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I think a big part of it too is having the ability where the parts of the app that I didn't like at the time or whatever else, we knew other users wouldn't like either, because it's a very, very similar use case, where the parts of the app that I thought were amazing, our users also thought were amazing, because we're in the same boat, right? We're pitching to the same demographic. So it was just faster to get the information we needed. And also, being students on campus, we're far more approachable and easier to talk to other students and be active. And a great part about the model was because clubs and people who create programming on campus want people to see their events. they were fairly easy to bring onto the app. And if they're going to put all the information up on the app, then everybody who attends their club already downloads the app to get informed about it. So there was a good trickle down kind of network effect that way, which was really useful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, you guys started to get some users on the product. You
Mm-hmm.
started to build up a bit of a reputation. You did this all with very little budget.
Yeah.
So I want to have an understanding. You don't need to tell me how much, but I just want to understand
Mm-hmm.
where the money came from for you guys to build the app and execute the marketing, and kind of
Sure.
how much was allocated where, just to have an idea, because you guys did this pretty lean. I think most money went towards the product. You guys
Almost
did a lot of
all money
hacking.
went to development. So
Yeah.
it was kind of self and friends and little friends and family money to get us over the end for development. Um, and then we were able to, I mean, outside of the development costs, I think marketing, we spent whatever our cash prize was, and then maybe $50 on candy we'd hand out at the booth. Um, it's very cheap to print stickers. It's very cheap to get buttons made. It's very cheap to get like Vistaprint, like business cards done, right? I think those are like $10 for like 500 or whatever it is. So our overall, I don't even think we spent over $1,000 on marketing in 2 years of operation. Like we went really, really lean on that. When it comes to man hours, that was the other side, right? Where we
Right.
knew the development of the app was at a spot where it was the hours it took for us to maintain wasn't super heavy, but we knew getting it out there would be excruciating. So there was a lot of, just in terms of labor, a lot of free labor came in terms of getting it spread that way. So that was the majority of the costs there.
Yeah, from a timeline perspective, when
Mhm.
did you land? When did you officially land your first customer?
Oh, it would have been August of, oh my God, is that 2017? No, it would have been August
2018?
2018. August
Yeah.
2018. Let's be right. Yeah,
Okay, so it was
was my goal.
before you started to ramp up the app for students. It was
Yeah.
actually just before the app launched.
We had just closed the deal, I think August 15th, maybe.
Okay.
And then it was very funny too, because like I remember sending that contract over to the faculty of music, and like, we'd like to add one stipulation. The stipulation is the app is available on the App Store when school starts. And we're like, yeah, that's absolutely 100%. We don't want you to buy a product and not receive it. So but there was like some question of like, hey, are you going to be able to get this done properly for September? And it was for sure. And it was down to the wire though, in terms of getting final approval from the Apple App Store, which you need to be on. I think we were, was it 3 days before the start of school, 2 days before the start of school, when the app was live on the App Store, and then had a big old party at the house with all these friends. And I said, it's free beer for anyone who comes up and puts events and fills everything out on the app to get this going. So it was right at the last second to get that final execution polished off. But come the start of school, the app was loaded with events and ready for users. So
Yeah. How much easier was life for you as an entrepreneur in a
mm,
startup once you actually closed your first customer?
uh, night and day, night and day. I mean, like we put ourselves in not a great position though, to be frank. Like the mistakes I think were made in terms of we thought we would have one type of funding or financing that would give us a significant amount of runway, that after all the term sheets were signed and everything was good to go, waiting on disbursement, the rules of the deal were changed. It just became something that we weren't comfortable signing. So when that happened, it put us in a tight spot. We're like, oh, now we really need cash flow. And if you took my blood pressure anywhere in July or August, it would have been probably pretty scary at the time for like a 20-year-old. So I slept a lot better by the things started to hit, not normalcy, because there's no true normal life when we're really working on a startup. But by November, when I knew the client was happy and that users are using the app and that things were kind of growing, I started to be able to sleep just a little bit better. And it changed my experience a lot.
Yeah. What was it like going through that experience with, all the stress of creating a business when you're dealing with these critical do or die moments when you have a team with you? Because, between yourself,
Mm-hmm.
Brett, Sam, and David, like there were four of you in the trenches.
Sure.
That must have felt good to have some friends that are
You know,
experiencing the same
it's
highs and the same lows.
I think this is make or break for so many startups, and you hear stories of people in partnerships where the number one thing breaking them down is somebody feels like somebody else isn't pulling their weight or whatever it is. And when you're in these moments, everybody is doing everything, and it's you're in the trenches. And you look to the guy on your left, and he's right in there with it. There's a great sense of camaraderie built there,
Yeah.
and really really useful with just get everything done and to know you're okay. And it's easy to go to work and be there on time and stay till exceptionally late because everybody else is there doing it with you. You kind of build your own mini cult where you buy in and believe it, and you just know the work has to get done for the vision you've kind of crafted together. So you're doing it for you, and on the days where it's really hard for you to do it for yourself, you do it for your teammates. And I'm lucky that I was very, very close friends with one of the partners already before this company started, and became very, very close with the other two founders as we continued to grow the company. And that helped us significantly in all the do or die moments. So, but I think a lot of that also, we got lucky that people had the work ethic needed and compatible skill sets. Uh, but it's interesting. It's definitely one of those kind of pressure points where you can find out whether or not you might be able to make it.
Absolutely. Hey, I have to ask you one strange question. I'm going to put a picture up and you need to tell me who this person means to you, okay? And why.
Okay, sure. Oh, okay. I think this is Ed Post. Am I right?
You're right.
Okay, so this is while building the platform, there was early on, we did not take a lot of time to celebrate because there was always a ton of work to do next just to set the stage. And we finished the development of the app, but we couldn't really celebrate because we had to get ready for launch right away. We did our launch. We didn't really have time to celebrate because we wanted to get right on growing it. We were growing for some time. And then we found one metric that was really, really important to us is when you Googled PostEd, the very first thing to come up was Ed Post murderer recently released from prison. I think he killed his wife or something or whatever it was. And we were, it was tough. I guess he still has he's number 2 on images.
Still up there.
Still, but news stories about him were number 1 on like the full first page of Google for quite some time. And it became a really big goal for us when we started working on our web presence to replace Ed Post as the top search result for PostEd with our own name. And it was like the first time we were able to we were in a spot where we could get together and, we planned on having a big party. And well, the startup life happens and we just kind of continued working where we had a brief acknowledgement that a large milestone, at least in our heads, was passed. And we moved on. It was one of those moments where we kind of took our heads out of the sand and we didn't have a big party like I think I really wanted to. It was a good moment to kind of reflect and look at what we had done overall, not just the Google listings, but that we'd actually built something. So.
Yeah, one of the reasons I think you guys succeeded in building something was because you guys have really good communication skills. And I know you believe from talking to you outside of this chat, I know that you believe it's really important to know how to pitch your business, to know what
Mhm.
to say, how to say it. Um, I and you come from a background in debate. You and Sam are both national debate champions.
One time or another, we've done a lot of tournaments.
There we
Uh,
go. I want to have a sense as to like, do you think that was an advantage? Would you encourage other entrepreneurs to learn a skill like debating? Because essentially, every single conversation you guys had with anyone, there was an element of debate, right?
well, I think it's so important to be persuasive, know what you're talking about, but more than that, how um, people recognize and interact with the information you're trying to present to them. And so much of that has to do with how you frame the ideas you want to describe to people in a pitch. And debate, in my eyes, is all about framing. I think debates are won and lost in the first 15 seconds of what you're talking about and how you want to set up your case. And since Sam and I have had, collectively decades of experience doing debate in one form or another at these different tournaments, we're really fast at, when we get a new idea for what a pitch should look like, turning it around, trying different frames on it, and executing that to see how it looks or feels, and then really, really closely analyzing each element of that pitch. What's working, what's not working, what should we do to change things.
Yeah.
And it was useful to have that skill. Debate, I love it. It to me, it's very much like a sport. I love the sport of it. I'm a very competitive person, and that's actually true for everybody on the team. Is they're very, very competitive people, and I think that's also an advantage in startup land. But having knowledge of really any skill or passion is great to inform the rest of your work. For Sam and I, it happened to be debate and was great because it gives us an advantage in the pitch room or talking to administrators about complex ideas, or really trying to flush out our understandings of the difficulties they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And being able to communicate like that, I think, is really, really useful. But I think as founders, you kind of have to have some kind of golden goose of your own, of like something that you're really special at, really good at doing, to give you that leg up on whatever the situation is.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any advice for someone who, you know, who is trying to structure their pitch? Is there like what do you think is the most important part of the pitch that's
Mhm.
overlooked, or what are you emphasizing the most? Have you learned something that you see really work that you want to share?
Sure. Well, first, we got introduced very early on at Ramp Up to the Mars format, and that's a great way to take a mediocre a pitch deck into like a pretty good pitch deck without a lot of changes. It's just a great structure of ideas. And even if you don't want to fully learn all the ins and outs and read a ton of books about pitching and do a ton of work, that's a great way to quick sharpen up. So a quick Google search, I think it's called the Mars format, or Mars pitch deck, was something we used early on. And then on top of that, what we found really, really useful is the more you can validate, the better. So it depends on your audience. Like tailoring your pitch to your audience, I think, is really, really important, right? If I'm talking to students about post-ed, I'm talking and focusing on a lot of different things than I would be talking to an administrator or a potential investor, or somebody who's just interested in my company. So I think being cognizant of who you're talking to is really useful. And then from there, knowing the value proposition you really want to talk to that's going to be important to them, and then breaking down that value proposition. How do you know it's true? Why is it impactful? Why does what any of your sayings matter? Like by having that kind of nagging toddler style of thinking, why to all the
Yeah.
things you're saying, and knowing kind of as close as you can get to a fundamental truth of the value you're bringing to whatever that conversation is, the more easily you'll be able to convey your ideas. So that's the biggest piece of advice: is uh, record yourself doing your pitch, and then after every single sentence you say, ask yourself, why is it important that I say that? And you'll probably be able to find an even more greater line to say in its place.
That's incredible. I've always thought about asking why as in, just ask the other person why. Because if you ask a
Mm.
customer, why is this important to you?
Oh,
If
for
you
sure.
ask a user, well, why are you clicking in this sequence and not that other sequence? You'll
Hmm.
learn a lot. But asking yourself why while you're talking. So when you're saying, we
Hmm.
are post ed, and thinking, why do they care? It really, like, the word empathy keeps coming into my mind, just really being cognizant of like who you're talking to and why they should care.
Hmm.
And that's where I think just some communication skills, social skills really go a long way. I've always loved conversations with customers and users because of what you can do with what you learn. Like, you don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to know why they do certain things. You don't need to even have the correct answer. What is that value proposition? You
Hmm.
communicate a value proposition, what you think. And I'm always very transparent. I'll say, I think this is why you'll like it.
Hmm.
Be honest, be a human, say we're an early stage company, we're doing this, we talk to these people, and this is what we think is the bread and butter of what we do. And then you hear from them and you hear how the customer and the user describes your business. You hear how the customer and the user explains why they would use your product, what it would solve, what keeps them up at night. You hear it with their words and not theirs. And then all of a sudden, when you're building your website copy, when you're building your next pitch deck, when you're building, that marketing material, when you're putting a slogan on your stickers, it's like, it's all informed, not really
Absolutely.
what you thought in your basement. It's like, what did the customer or user say, right?
Well, you're hitting the nail right on the head. It's so much about learning the language of your industry is so important. I think part of our unfair advantage is we knew the language that students speak to each other in order to uh, connect with them about the things they cared about. But it took us a while to learn the language of administrators, how university administrators think and interact, and how they value things, and when they value things, how do they describe that? And I got to give credit to my father for teaching me this, but he introduced me to the world of high gain, open-ended questions. Um, it, these should comprise 90% of your meeting with like any client, is asking the types of questions to get them talking and giving you information you need about their needs, what's working in your value proposition, about how they see it. And you'll be learning essentially a language of how to talk to them and articulate your ideas and to show why what you have is so valuable to them in their own words. And that's so important. Um, and it really opens up everything when you're able to frame the right types of questions where you target them in a particular area, right? We know we want to talk about student engagement. We think that's important. So I can go and say, what keeps you up at night about student engagement? Or how do you even measure questions dealing about student engagement? Or, what matters to this? Why is it even important to engage students anyway? Right? And that, to me, I feel at the start of this process, while I'm arrogant, of course, I know why it's important to engage students. It's all about this one thing. And every administrative ask has a different answer because it's so important for so many reasons for them. And if I go at it and I'm talking about, oh, my thing's so important and this piece of value, is I could be entirely missing them, even though I might be solving all the problems they have if I just ask them really what those problems are. So I think it's so incredibly important to actively listen and ask the right types of questions that will give you the information you need to better serve customers.
Yep, bang on, buddy. Um, from customer number one to customer number two. So we have a
Mm-hmm.
bit of an interruption right now because we have a global
Sure.
pandemic. But outside of that context, what will be your strategy to get customer number two based on customer number one? Now, I think
Mm-hmm.
part of that strategy was you wanted to knock it out of the park with customer number one, right? You guys
Yeah.
have done things that are not scalable because you've had all of the co-founders on campus working
Mm-hmm.
with users, working with faculty to make sure your numbers look good, to make sure the analytics look good.
Absolutely.
You're doing things that don't scale so that you can crack open a market
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. And I'd imagine you're going to package that up, put a bow on it, and you're going to try to sell that story to other faculties and or other
Sure.
schools in other locations. Do you want to kind of share your strategy on customer number two based on what you've done with number one?
Absolutely. The one thing we found that's even more important than ever, again, when it comes to new clients, is that credibility and building a name in EdTech is so important. It's a very highly relationship-based business. So the reason why I think the music deal was able to go as smoothly and swimmingly as it did, it wasn't just because we hit the right value points, but champions within the faculty recognized that and were able to champion the product without us even in the room. And so building those relationships and getting those types of touch points are really, really important. But in order to build champions, I think you also have to have the credibility for them to support you and the things to back that up. So we've been actually experimenting with a different route. We're trying to get away from just serving faculties individually outside of the faculty of music. We love them forever. But in the future, we want to serve schools in their entirety because we think we can do so more effectively and efficiently. However, that's a much longer sales cycle and a much larger process. We found some very interesting conversation inroads, and we had a lot going on before this Corona crisis. And one of these interesting plans we're looking into is actually doing a research project, because academics love research and being able to back up our claims of what we're able to do for the student body with real tangible data is something we're really interested in doing. So our next step right now is building actually a research program at a full-scale university, and then tracking the differences in behavior between users of post-ed and non-users of post-ed, and seeing what their differences, not just fully on retention, but engagement and a variety of other KPIs that are really, really important for universities. Now, we know from our own internal data that we do a lot for these students, and that our users' outcomes are significantly strong. And we were really happy with the type of data and analytics we've been able to collect. The next step, though, is creating something that's publishable. And so that's what we're on target to do right now with a partnership with university in the near future. I'm hearing a rumor now that I hope is not true, that some schools may not open up, or events might be not on for September, which would be a very difficult time for our company, the same as it would be very difficult for any venue or anyone else who serves events.
Totally.
However, which has kind of thrown a wrench in the plans, as it has, I'm sure, for everybody else. But the idea now is to build up further credibility and find a way to package all the information we've taken so far through essentially our beta site and development and early commercialization, and bring away so that we can package that with all the systems we've built to kind of automize how we were able to roll out to a variety of other universities, both throughout Canada and the United States.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because, you're doing it. I think you want to do something that's peer reviewed. You're doing true research that you're talking about to back you up, and we could talk, we could argue if it needs to be peer reviewed or not. At the end of the day, though, I think what you're trying to do is you're just trying to prove your value proposition.
Absolutely.
Because like every business, like talking about tech companies specifically, where you have something new and shiny, it's all about that one statement. What can you do to help the customer? What exactly do you do? And often it does come down to something like dollars, or it comes down to something like brand, but it has to be something very clear and actionable. So if you can say that you increase the retention rate by X percent, if you can say that students are X percent more engaged, and therefore you can make the assumption that it's going to increase another metric by Y percent, and they can tie that into dollars, then it's simply a matter of like return on investment for the school. Absolutely. Right? So I guess it gets easier. The more customers you have, the more data you have, Absolutely. The more you can just back up these statements and say it's not about vanity. It's a financial gain here.
100%. exactly what the plan is. The reason why we're taking through this proposal route is, one, we've actually found it's easier to get integrated into a university through this path in some scenarios. And two, we've also found that, universities, the administrators live and breathe research. A lot of them are researchers themselves, and they like to see proof in the pudding. And a lot of them will get cagey if they see a statistic without a source. And so I'd love to give them that source in a medium that they're comfortable with. And if that aligns with some of the other things we're trying to do, we might as well go full throttle with it. And well, I think a lot of other companies don't jump into academia on their products for a variety of reasons, but also they may not want to share the results if they aren't favorable.
Right. Yeah.
We're very comfortable with the results we're going to be able to pursue. And if somehow, some way, they find out that post-ed's actually detrimental to students and that we're not creating value, then it's not something I want to be part of. And we're okay walking away from something that doesn't do anything for anyone. However, I'm very confident that that won't be the case.
Yeah.
So we're more than happy to get real tangible proof and credibility in this field, so much as building that brand, building that name, and creating that network of both thought leaders and champions in order to grow into other schools and universities. A lot of other vendors we've spoken to who are in the same sphere, I don't think there's anyone who does quite really what we do, but people who make online orientations or whatever else found that they took years and years and years after maybe one or two clients to get established. And then they blow up and are in every university because it's building that trust and credibility. And just as an industry seems to move slower than some other comparable industries.
And I suppose you've come to this conclusion by talking to your customers, by understanding what's important to them, how they make decisions, and ultimately believing that you have a unique and beneficial product that stands out. I remember going to a Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, and I remember looking at the literally thousands of companies that were there. There's 101,000 people at this event, and looking at the companies, looking at their marketing strategy, and honestly believing that the majority of them do not have an exceptionally good product from a value proposition. They need to put all this marketing polish on it to get it out the door, because if they don't have a really good marketing strategy, the product's not good enough to rely on its own credibility, on its own, word of mouth, on the idea that people will just talk to each other because it stands out. And I think that's what you're trying to do at Post-Ed, something that, of course, you want to have a sound marketing strategy, a solid brand. But at the end of the day, if you have something that really works and you've invested your marketing strategy to essentially just prove that and double down efforts, then it should be something that at some point it snowballs and starts to sell itself. And every school will wonder, why have we not implemented this, right? Is that the goal?
Well, that's the goal. That's the goal. We want to build it in a way where we're working very closely with the right schools to get started, to make sure that our systems are really simple, that because a rollout at a new school has to happen simultaneously, everybody gets started in September, that we know that some years we're going to be doing large amounts of onboarding, and we want to make sure that our systems to get users onboarded and the database full of events and things they can interact with are able to roll out fairly seamlessly. And so building those systems really tightly with a smaller test group right now, and getting the data and analytics on the usage basis, and then proving out each and every one of these metrics that it works, and getting champions to support it. That's where we are right now. And from there, obviously the idea is that, well, the proof's in the pudding, and that it pushes on.
How important is it to have the right first customer and to do the right things with the first customer, as opposed to just getting the sale?
You have to look after them.
The work's not done now, right?
Well, I think so many look at what happens next, right? Because as soon as you have your first customer, all your next customer is going to want to do is talk to the first one and make sure they don't feel like they got ripped off.
Right.
So when we do everything we can to serve our clients to the fullest ability. With the Faculty of Music, after our first year, we just signed a 1-year contract at the start. And when we came into the second year, I had all my analytics and books and ready to pitch again for another year at the University of Manitoba. And right as I walked into the pitch door, the new dean said, just so you know, I already have the money aside to keep you here next year. And that told me, you know, we had done our job, that we built enough value, that they recognized the type of value we created for them. And that was a really big piece of validation for us, but a great piece of validation for future business development. Because if anybody wants to ask, hey, do people actually like this on the administrator end, we are more than happy to send them their way.
Yeah, that must have been one of the greatest moments, not just because of the money that was coming in, but on the fact that you knew you guys did your job. You knew that it worked, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like you're really building a relationship with your first customer that's going to allow you to get that extra value out, to tell
Mm-hmm.
the right case study, so that when customer number 2 calls customer number 1, you know, hey, Bob, John, how was your experience? I'm sure they're going to say the right things. And you get so much more, I think, out of building that relationship, right? It's not just
Your
a
first
sale.
customer, it's more than revenue. It's really about that relationship is the most important piece of value you can get from that. And you hear, you know, if your first customer is a horror story and you still want to pursue this idea or your company, you'll have a lot of difficulty. You'll have a lot of difficulty.
Yeah. Do you have
So
any advice, Carson, for someone that wants to sell software
sure.
or anything? Someone wants to
Mm-hmm.
do a big sale to a university. Do you have any advice
Oof.
about how to navigate that? You can broaden this up to talk about a sale
Sure.
in general, but we're
Sure.
talking about a big sale to a big customer. What's one
Yeah.
key takeaway you would give to
Well,
another entrepreneur?
it's the interesting thing with enterprise sales. I guess on that is learning to navigate their systems and find the right people to talk to is so important. Talk to as high up as you possibly can go.
Mm,
Always don't get a no from someone who cannot say yes. And it's really important that way. And then go in with an atmosphere of just wanting to learn about how the systems work and what they're looking for and what's going on that way. The more you're there to learn, the more doors will open for you. So I would say that's the best way. They don't take really well to any kind of aggressive sales strategy. You're never going to be able to browbeat a university, but there's just too much going on there.
yeah.
You won't be able to do it. Obviously, persistence is key. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are dissuaded by the speed of university. But don't be afraid to show up, to knock on doors, and to ask questions. And that is going to streamline your approach a lot faster than a lot of other methods. Cold emails don't get read for the most part, so you'll end up sending a lot of them.
Yeah. So you said, basically find the best champions you can find. You have an attitude that you're there to learn. Be persistent. Knock on doors. Just
Yeah.
do it.
We
And you mentioned to go as high as you can go, right?
Yeah, well, we would take, so universities all have org charts, which is really useful. So you can kind of tell who's responsible for what. Unfortunately, every school's definition of one job title doesn't necessarily match another school's. You can't really tell who holds the power until you actually go and find out. You'll find out quickly, but you have to do the work to actually find out that. But what we would do is we will take at a push board, and we took an entire org chart and mapped out who we're talking to, who might influence them, who's important here, and then try to cover our basis where who we might be able to flip into a champion, who we can try to win neutrality from, and who's probably best avoided. So it's one of those things where you want to quickly map out the ecosystem you're going to be involving yourself in, and then finding the best way to get involved in that on an appropriate level. If you get, and the biggest thing, and I've got a good story about this, the reason why you really want to understand your ecosystem is you can accidentally upset a lot of people if you don't know what you're doing. So for instance, if you get a hard no from someone, someone in the university, and you're getting a lot of, yeses or whatever else, or further conversations otherwise in the university, you can get some confusing points. And obviously, you never get stopped by a hard no, but if someone's direct superior gives you a hard no, and then you talk to their subordinate, and then there's more conversations there can be a huge mess. And with universities, unfortunately, it's easy for that to happen by accident, because you kind of don't really know who reports to who unless you do some really deep digging through a lot of websites. And so that was a lesson we learned very, very quickly, of how not to tread on people's toes. Not that I think it's definitely okay to throw some sand in the air everywhere and make a bit of a splash, but you don't need to needlessly antagonize people.
Right.
And if you are, you never want to do so by accident. You want, even if that's what your plan is, you don't care about ruffling some feathers, you should know whose feathers you're about to ruffle. So I think it's important to do your due diligence and do your homework entering the university thing, because it is published on their website, but you do have to look for it.
Yeah. So be cautious, but don't be too cautious, right? Because it seems like you will never master that political game. You will never talk to the right person perfectly. I guess if you're kind about it and you're thoughtful, you'll have the best chance of doing it. Do you have any parting words of wisdom, Carson, to somebody out there who's looking to find their first customers and first users?
I guess the best piece of advice is to just not be afraid to do it. It helps, if you're older, you have a little more credibility to the ideas you're going to pitch, because people just tend to trust older people better. And if you're younger, you'll have higher likelihood of getting their time, because everybody, come in with that student angle of, hey, I'm learning, I'm thinking about doing this. I want to get your perspective on it, because I, respect your position, and I think you might have some insight I'd love to know more about. And having that attitude will open up a lot of doors. The one thing about Post-Ed is, when we started it, I always expected someone to appear from on high out of the woodwork and describe to me how it wouldn't work. And it just kind of never happened, where you're able to continue to build, and you'll get a slight objection here or there, but in your head, well, I know how to work around this and continue to build and grow. And really the only person kind of stopping you from getting started in any type of entrepreneurial endeavor, I think all of our biggest enemies are ourselves. So kind of getting over that hump, just acknowledging that not everybody's going to like you, but some people might actually really love you. And it's really useful to put yourself out there and test out your ideas in the real world.
100%, Carson. You and I have worked together in the best of times. You guys have also gone through some challenging times, and I've been right there with you.
Absolutely.
As I'm showing in this picture here, there's two versions of Carson. There's Carson in the media, and there's Carson behind the scenes. When it's 11:30 p.m. One day before the app needs to hit the store, and we're still waiting.
Oh, look at that screenshot! My goodness. Yeah, that was a few haircuts ago.
It was a few haircuts ago, but at the end of the day, we had a lot of
oh my goodness
way to get it done. And yeah, I had a really fun time working with you and Brett and Sam and David to get this MVP, minimum viable product, built. And I've always considered you a leader in terms of how you communicate, how you think, your approach to business development. You guys went out there and you found your first customer. So that's something that, cannot be underlooked. That's going to go down as one of the highlights in your business history, as it should be for any company. And Carson, for anyone that wants to check Post-Ed out on social media, on a website, get in touch. Do you have any plugs?
Absolutely. So there's Post-Ed on campus on Instagram. There's posted.com. And I think we also have posted.info to talk more about the company itself and what we do and what we're trying to build.
100%. And if you're a student,
and it's obviously, if you're a student, and right now, if you're at the University of Manitoba, there's not a lot of events going on. uh, considering. But there have been in the past, and there will be a ton more. You can use PostEd by going to the App Store or Google Play and creating an account using your university email is how we have it segmented so that you go to the right university when you sign up. And feel free to check out the app and leave any comments on the App Store if anything you want changed or grown or what you appreciate about the app.
Perfect. Carson, thanks a lot for joining me for this chat. It was a real slice, and I hope to have you back at some point.
My pleasure, Luke. Always fun talking.
100%. So that's episode 2 of the First Customer Club. I'm Luke Bohaneke, and we are helping you figure out and how to navigate your first customers, your first users with real stories in the trenches. Have a good one, Carson. Thanks again, buddy.
Have a good one, Luke. Good talking.